Foxconn is the world's largest maker of electronics components, whose clients include Sony, Nokia, HP, Dell, and Apple. It manufactures iPhone and iPad. Over a period of months in 2010, about 14 workers from Foxconn factories across China left to their deaths, with more suicides attempted. Reports allege that the company's largest plant in Songcheng is like a labor camp, where workers were beaten, forced to work long hours without overtime, and with little regard to health and safety, and where they faced discrimination from Taiwanese co-workers. This particular slide show the ages and also the number of workers that committed suicide. Our organization seeks public responses from companies when concerns are raised about their conduct. And this ensures that our users get all viewpoints on the problem, while encouraging companies to address concerns. With each new concern raised, we invited Foxconn to respond, and each time it did so. We posted on our website and in our weekly updates Foxconn statements, as well as continuing concerns raised by labor groups inside and outside China. From time to time, Singaporean firms operating overseas are accused of abuses. Sorry about this. From time to time, Singaporean firms operating overseas are accused of abuses. For example, this year, the Institute for Global Labor and Human Rights reported serious abuses at an Ocean Sky International factory in El Salvador, which employs 1,500 employees, workers, mostly women. The allegations included sexual harassment, verbal and physical abuse, forced overtime, contaminated drinking water, and failure to pay a living wage. The facility was reportedly surrounded by barbed wire and controlled by guards armed with shotguns. We invited Ocean Sky to respond, which it did, saying that it was operating with an independent investigation of the factory and would take necessary steps to remediate the situation. And by May, the Institute for Global Labor and Human Rights announced that the workers had won major improvements, while some challenges still remain. And now to China. Just as NGOs have become increasingly active in Taiwan, so do we see mainland Chinese NGOs were forced on monitoring corporate conduct. The number of mainland Chinese companies we track on website has grown to more than 360. Our overall response rate globally is 75%. We are nevertheless pleased that our response rate by mainland Chinese private companies is 50%, because for some, when I email and telephone them, this may be the first time international NGO has approached them to seek public response to human rights concerns. For China's large state-owned enterprises, the response rate is 38%. And we believe response rates by Chinese firms will increase because they increasingly care about their international reputation and because of their growing ambition to become world-class companies. You won't be surprised to hear that many cases in China concern abuses of workers' rights. And in some cases in China, we see companies take steps to address labor abuses. But many challenges remain, exacerbated by the lack of independent unions that you all know of. Increasingly, we receive reports about alleged abuses by Chinese companies operating abroad. For example, in March, we secured a response from a Chinese state-owned enterprise called China Railway Construction Corporation to concerns raised by two human rights NGOs. The company's Ecuadorian subsidiary, Corriente Resources, reportedly failed to consult the indigenous population, which was forcibly evicted from the designated mining site and polluted their local water source. Of course, in all these cases, the key actors are the groups working on the ground, exposing harmful corporate conduct and seeking to change it, One of the most effective NGOs in China is the Institute of Public and Environmental Affairs, Margin's organization. Over the past year and a half, Margin has led a network of Chinese environmental organizations calling on multinational IT firms to address the fact that some of the Chinese suppliers dump heavy metals into Chinese water bodies, causing serious harm to the health of communities. We were able to assist by securing responses from all the multinationals and had not previously responded to Margin and his partners. I will leave this to Margin to explain further the ongoing work he and his partners are doing on these issues. Before concluding my presentation, I would like to bring your attention 5 encouraging trends in China that I could observe over the past year. First, joint campaigns of Chinese NGOs have emerged as an effective strategy to make all companies doing business in China, including American and European brands, mindful of their harmful impacts and what they can do to eliminate them. Second, campaigners in Africa, Asia, and other regions have begun to network with Chinese NGOs. They found common ground working together to make Chinese business more accountable for their human rights impacts. Third, an increasing number of lawsuits and formal complaints have been brought in mainland China by Chinese alleging abuses by their employees. Hundreds of thousands of cases each year. The cost of local mediation or arbitration committees rule in favor of the workers in significant percentage of these cases. And fourth, a more independent Chinese media is increasing its reporting on business impacts inside and outside China, promoting greater transparency. And fifth, the Chinese government supported adoption of the new United Nations Guiding Principles on Business and Human Rights. But this is not to say that the present or future for business and human rights in China is all rosy. There are many significant and serious concerns that remain and need to be addressed. And I believe the way forward is to give more attention to both the concerns and the positive examples in China, to engage Chinese companies as global players and to hold them to international human rights standards. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Mei Ling. I am so honored to have the chance to introduce our next speaker, Mary Robinson. Mary Robinson was the first female president of Ireland. She was the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights. She was the founder of Realizing Rights, the Ethical Globalization Initiative, and now she's president of the Mary Robinson Foundation Climate Justice. For me and for many advocates around the world, Mary Robinson is a personal hero and a great inspiration. When she was the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights and beyond, she set a new global agenda for human rights that changed our world. She encouraged us to look at the human rights responsibilities of business at a time when business and human rights was, by most of us, considered a contradiction in terms. She encouraged us, she pushed us to treat the economic underpinnings of injustice and inequality, to look at fulfilling economic and social rights with as much seriousness as we did protecting civil and political rights. It is a great honor to have her here today. Thank you so much for joining us, Mary.
Thank you very much for those warm words, and I too would like to extend a warm welcome to all of you. As you've heard, I've been a very strong supporter of the Business and Human Rights Resource Centre from the beginning, and I'd like to congratulate Chris Avery and everybody that you've seen and heard this evening associated with the Resource Centre. Over the last 10 years, it has grown into an extraordinarily valuable resource for all of us who are interested in the area of business and human rights, and indeed human rights more broadly, because the website has developed in such an exciting way. and the research that is being done by the researchers that we've been introduced to, and who are in the key parts of the world where they can really know the situation on the ground, provide a transparency, as we've heard, and an access to this information. I was quite shell-shocked, in fact, when Chris Avery first approached me with the idea of a speaker series in my name. But at least I knew they'd do it well, because that's what the Business and Human Rights Resource Centre do. Last year was more tensionful. I was a little less relaxed. This year, I'm really enjoying the evening. And I was particularly pleased when the second annual event in this series was going to involve the largest country in the world, China, and a speaker on the link between human rights and the environment, because that's in fact a space that I've been coming into myself, linking development, human rights and climate change in the Mary Robinson Foundation Climate Justice. But also, when I had the honour to serve as High Commissioner for Human Rights, I did give particular priority to China, because it is the largest country in the world, because it was important to engage both with the Chinese government and with civil society and with those who were interested and involved in human rights in China, as we've heard from Mei Ling this evening. I made 7 working visits to China, and I have a very strong recollection of the kind of discussions we had on re-education through labour, on police and human rights, on the judiciary and human rights. The Office of High Commissioner for Human Rights would bring the experts from outside, and increasingly the Chinese authorities engaged. And during that time, China signed the 2 main covenants, the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights and the International Covenant on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights, and more importantly, ratified the Covenant on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights. And at the same time, it was clear that many of the rights to food and safe water, health, education and shelter were being advanced quite dramatically by China, which was bringing hundreds of thousands, indeed millions of people out of poverty. And yet, as we've heard already, and as we'll hear more of, some of these rights are under particular threats in some cities and locations in China because of environmental pollution and toxic waste affecting China's water bodies. And it's for this reason that I was particularly pleased that the second speaker, main speaker in this series, is Ma Jun. I first heard of him when he was named by Time magazine in 2006 as one of the 100 most influential people in the world. And I was pleased to learn that he has been collaborating with the Business and Human Rights Resource Centre over the last few years in the context of his leadership of a network of Chinese environmental NGOs, calling on multinational IT firms in particular to take action to stop their supplier factories from dumping heavy metals into China's water bodies. And this actually provides another link with a different hat that I still wear as the outgoing chair of the Institute for Human Rights and Business. In January, John Ruggie will take over as chair. The Institute produced last August a report entitled More Than a Resource, Water, Business and Human Rights. And I think I'll slip a copy to Ma Jun later this evening in case he hasn't as yet seen a copy, because I think it's really important to link not just the worlds of addressing environmental concerns and human rights concerns, but also the work that is being done by the treaty bodies, by the rapporteurs on food, on water, and so on. This is where I think we can really make an important connection. Ma Jun will speak on environmental challenges and China's green choices. He is the preeminent environmental advocate in China today. And his book, written in 1999, China's Water Crisis, warned about the potentially catastrophic consequences of heedless, unsustainable growth. He has brought his journalistic skills and his clear and I think very courageous advocacy, and indeed China's own statistics to bear on the efforts that he is making to address these environmental concerns. I was also impressed when we spoke earlier at his superb command of the English language. And I thought to myself how few of us are as fluent in Chinese, and it seems to be necessary that we make that more of an equal way of being able to communicate directly through language.